Marco Rubio, you've been chipping away for 4 years, but you're out. Tim Scott, you didn't make it. Sorry, you're on the bench. Vivek, you have been on the verge, so close to the brink, but no, to the stands. Vance, warm up and go out. VisualPolitik viewers, Trump has already chosen his running mate, JD Vance. And keep in mind, more than just a running mate, he could have practically chosen his successor. Donald Trump is 78 years old, and in the Trumpist camp, they don't want the same thing to happen to them as happened to Biden. That is, to plug any clear successor and risk losing the enormous control they've gained over the Republican Party.
I would say that we have a very, very unified party. Mitch has been fantastic.
What's more, if he returns to the White House, and this is important, Trump can only serve one term. In other words, he will not be eligible to run for re-election in any way. And not because by 2028 he would already be very old, which he would be, but basically because the Constitution forbids it. Remember that in the United States, there is a limitation of 2 maximum terms in the presidency. So a replacement is needed, someone younger who, on top of that, has enough energy to show his teeth and become the Doberman of the party, of the campaign, and if necessary, of the government. And guess what? That's exactly this man.
I gotta be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another.
This guy is JD Vance, Trump's new White House running mate. That is, his vice presidential candidate. The man named to become the president's sword and the replacement for Mike Pence, a guy who ended up so fed up with Trump that he doesn't even want to see a painted version of him anymore.
Will you be endorsing your former president?
And it should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year. Trump is pursuing and articulating an agenda that is at odds with the conservative agenda that we governed on during our 4 years. And that's why I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Donald Trump in this campaign.
So the question is, who on earth is JD Vance? Where did he come from? Why was he chosen? And perhaps the most important question of all, why on earth is it being said all over the place that we are looking at Trump's new successor? Well, the first thing we need to know is that Vance is not just any guy. He served as a Marine, earned his law degree from prestigious Yale University, and maintains close ties to many wealthy Silicon Valley donors. Among other things because he worked hand in hand with Peter Thiel. In fact, for a while, he worked at the highest level in the venture capital firm of this billionaire, known, among other things, for co-founding PayPal and being the first investor in Facebook. And the truth is that Peter Thiel must like this candidate. He spent millions and millions of dollars to support his senatorial candidacy. In short, military, Yale graduate, and friend of Silicon Valley. Almost as good as it gets, but there's more. Don't think that this guy comes from a privileged environment. Quite the contrary. He didn't have an easy childhood, in a family hard hit by poverty and addiction to drugs and alcohol. So whichever way you look at it, the guy has merit. Let's just say, his profile is very similar to what a Hollywood screenwriter would have mapped out when writing a movie precisely about the presidential elections. Let's see, who could think of a better guy to go with the new Captain America named Captain Trump? Well, that's not even all. Although he has only 2 years of experience in the big political posts of Washington, he's a senator for Ohio, one of the states that best represents what Trumpism is all about. A political movement that in large part has triumphed precisely due to the frustration for millions of people with the demise of the old industrial and rural America. In fact, Vance became famous for writing this book, which ended up becoming a bestseller. In it, he tells us about the serious problems facing his hometown, located in the Rust Belt, along with the working class people of that place. A story that was later taken to the big screen and that you can all watch on Netflix. Well, the fact is that the new vice presidential candidate buys into the whole Trumpist package. That is, stricter borders, much higher tariffs on everything, government intervention in the economy, and foreign policy, almost total isolationism. America, by and for Americans. You know, make America great again.
Are you a racist? Do you hate Mexicans? The media calls us racist for wanting to build Trump's wall. They censor us, but it doesn't change the truth. Joe Biden's open border is killing Ohioans, with more illegal drugs and more Democrat voters pouring into this country. This issue is personal. I nearly lost my mother to the poison coming across our border. No child should grow up an orphan. I'm JD Vance, and I approve this message because whatever they call us, we will put America first.
You see, there's a reason why the Democrats are already dubbing him the clone, or mini-Trump.
clone of Trump on the issues. A clone of Trump on the issues. So I don't see any difference.
Although the truth is that he has a much more conservative profile. For example, he is critical of the separation of families and strongly opposes the right to abortion, even in cases of incest or rape. He only condones it if the mother's life is in danger. Here, Trump has a much more, how shall I put this, much more liquid standpoint. Although yes, both candidates considered that this has to be a fundamentally state issue. But that's not all. On international politics, Vance also has less orthodox views. Do you remember the video we posted at the beginning about Ukraine? Well, there's that. Vance led a political battle in the Senate to block the $60 billion military aid package that ultimately passed without his support. So the choice of this vice president seems to confirm the worst fears. If he gets to the White House, Trump clearly intends to dump the Ukrainians and hand a huge victory to Vladimir Putin. But that will be the topic of another video. Let's not get sidetracked for now. The fact is that right now we're talking about a young guy, very young. Vance is just 39 years old, half the average age of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Specifically, we're talking about 39 years younger than Trump, 41 years younger than Biden, and 20 years younger than Kamala Harris. He is the first millennial to make the leap to major politics, and in an election dominated by such elderly candidates, it stands to reason that this attracts attention. Of course, despite the huge age difference, Vance is a lot like his godfather, and not only in terms of ideas, he also shares with him exactly the same aggressive rhetorical style. Without going any further, following the attack on Trump in Pennsylvania, Vance was quick to jump down Joe Biden's throat, even if it was to accuse the president of being largely responsible for a 20-year-old with conservative views attacking Trump.
The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to the assassination attempt on President Trump.
As if they had nothing to do with polarizing and heating up the political debate to the extreme. But pay attention, because this man, who has now become Trump's right-hand man, was a raging anti-Trumpist back in 2016. In fact, he went so far as to describe Trump as America's potential Hitler. But of course, you know that in politics, everything evolves very fast. Do you want another example of this evolution? Well, if in his bestseller, Vance defended the Japanese companies that invested in the United States, and that according to him were saving Ohio, now he suddenly says that they are a danger because they are loyal to a foreign government. This makes him, for instance, oppose the purchase of US steel by Nippon Steel. Let me stress again, America by and for Americans. But okay, this is JD Vance. The question is, why did Trump pick him? Basically, because of one thing: to help him win in the Great Lakes states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. 3 states that share many social and economic characteristics with Ohio. And take note, this is not coming from us. Trump himself said as much on media networks when publicly introducing him. He specifically said that from now on, his new running mate will focus, and I'm quoting literally, on the people he already fought so brilliantly for: American workers and farmers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Minnesota, and far beyond. And no matter what happens with the campaign, these are and will be the key states, the states that will choose the next tenant of the White House. If the Democrats, whether with Biden or another candidate, do not win those states, retaining the White House will be virtually impossible. This time, the country is so polarized that the election is largely down to what is known as the Great Lakes Blue Wall, a traditionally heavily Democratic region, but one where support for this party has dropped precipitously in recent years. In fact, they were the states that cost Hillary Clinton the presidency, and that's why Trump's campaign managers have had them clearly in their sights from the beginning. The election is basically played out here. The rest of the pie has already been shared out, and it doesn't matter. As you can see, now with Vance, they seem to want to reinforce this bet even more. Let me spell it out. We're talking about a politician who knows the terrain very well, and who knows perfectly well how all those people feel, who remember, or at least think they remember, that one day when times were better. On top of that, of course, he's young enough to be running around non-stop. Although, don't expect a miracle either. In the 2022 election in Ohio, Vance did worse with his Senate bid than Trump in 2020, and worse than Republican congressional candidates. But yes, we're talking about a guy who at least knows the terrain. Not surprisingly, this is not the only crucial factor that this nomination leaves us with. Pay attention to this. This senator is, curiously, an old friend and former classmate of Vivek Ramaswamy, the businessman who ran in the 2024 Republican primaries, and who these days is more Trumpist than Trump himself. And what does this mean? That along with Trump and his children, we are witnessing the birth of a kind of top leadership that aims to control the Republican Party with an iron fist. We are basically witnessing the birth of the next generation of Republican leaders, and it is a fundamentally Trumpist generation.
To nominate Donald J. Trump for the office of President of the United States!
Remember that until now, the party has been led by dinosaurs like Mitch McConnell, forming a gerontocracy whose careers are coming to an end because they are no longer able to control this new nationalist alt-right movement that has taken over the party. And keep in mind that this may be one of Donald Trump's greatest victories. Think about it. We're talking about a guy who came in as a true outsider in 2016, and today, 9 years later, is controlling the entire Republican Party. Now, issues such as free trade or fiscal discipline have been shelved in order to give free rein to what we could call the cultural and identity recovery of America. Or, I don't know, something along those lines. Of course, with this control over the party, Trump will have a free hand to purge whomever he wants. Fewer and fewer will dare to even cough at him. And there's not much more to say. But if there's one thing to recognize about Trump, it's that with his energy, he has practically eaten up the entire American right wing. But now, has the Ohio senator's nomination been his best bet? Well, there are many doubters here, among other reasons, because in theory, Vance doesn't bring anything different. With other vice presidential frontrunners, Trump would have managed to raise his profile in other fields, which is exactly what is usually sought with the vice presidential choice. A tremendously symbolic figure, but rather empty in political terms. In fact, that is exactly what Trump himself did when he chose Mike Pence in 2016. A very conservative guy who allowed him to boost his popularity among Midwestern voters and among the evangelical population. Well, in a similar fashion. In this case, Marco Rubio, for instance, would have allowed him to better reach Hispanic audiences. Or with Governor Burgum of North Dakota, he would have gained moderation. But with Vance, the candidacy gains virtually none of that. Youth perhaps, but nothing more. It doesn't even strengthen Trump's position in any of the states in play, because Ohio certainly isn't anymore. And do you know what? Precisely for this reason, for many, this has been a clear gesture of strength. According to this view, Trump has looked so strong that he has preferred to focus on controlling the party well and reinforcing Trumpism as an ideology within the Republican order. In other words, as we said earlier, he's been looking for a natural successor capable of consolidating his political project. Trump may no longer want to be just Trump, but also the founding father of a new political current. And VisualPolitik community, we don't know if he had already decided or not, but what is certain is that following the attack, Trump seems stronger than ever. The failed attack is changing everything. Suddenly, the 46th president no longer looks like an extremist, and the fact that his chances of victory have skyrocketed has also led to new friends popping up all over the place. Friends like, for example, Elon Musk, the architect of X, Tesla, SpaceX, and so many other companies. Not only has some affinity for Trump, but now wants to curry favor with him, and is even reportedly looking to become a kind of special advisor for this possible second term. Could it be that he doesn't want Trump to completely target the electric car if he gets to the White House? We don't know, but what has been leaked is that good old Elon is going to put up a lot, and we're talking about a lot of money to support Trump's campaign. How much money are we talking about? Just take a look.
Elon Musk has said he is committing about $45 million a month to a new pro-Trump super PAC.
$45 million every month. That's a lot. A lot of money. Real money. Imagine the amount of ads, merchandising, staff, and even media campaigns that can be paid with such a fortune. If Elon keeps his word, the total would be more than $150 million. How crazy. But the truth is that it is not an exception either. In general, it must be said that lately the great fortunes of the United States are supporting Trump much more than they did before, so money is not going to be lacking. But beyond the bills, what are the polls telling us? Basically, Trump is winning on the street. The numbers are a disaster for Biden. They were not good before the debate, although they were improving for the current president. But since that failed debate, voting intention in his favor has fallen basically because independent voters and many Democrats just see him as too old. And now, after the attack, everything indicates that Biden's loss of voters is not only going to stop, but may even increase. And the worst thing for the Democrats is that in the polls, Trump is not only winning nationally, but particularly particularly cleaning up in key states. We're talking about him leading in every single swing state. In Arizona, for example, one of the swing states that gave Biden the win in 2020, today sees Biden trailing Trump by about 7 points. And let me stress, these are surveys conducted before the attack. Now the gap may be even bigger. And yes, it's true that there are also more positive polls for Biden, but in general, in these states where the game is really played, all the numbers are pretty bad for the Democratic nominee. There are even reports that point to states that Democrats previously considered totally safe, such as Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Virginia, now potentially being in play. This is a new setback. To give you an idea, in 2020, Biden won New Hampshire by more than 7 points. We're talking about a state that has not endorsed a Republican presidential candidate since 2000. The good news for the Democrats, however, is that the same is not true in the other races. I mean, Senate and congressional candidates in those same states perform much better. In other words, the problem is not so much with the Democratic Party as with Joe Biden's candidacy, which is precisely what is causing the Democratic Party to ask him to step aside once and for all. But we'll talk about that in an upcoming video here on VisualPolitik. Be that as it may, if one thing is clear today, it is that the new vice presidential candidate is going to make a lot of money with this appointment. And no, I'm not saying that because he's going to get it from some crony or anything like that. It's just that the sales of his book are skyrocketing. But now that we've come this far, it's your turn. What do you think of Vance's election as vice president? Do you think the election is already decided? Leave us your impressions in the comments and let's start a debate. And now, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like it. All the best. I'll see you next time.
To nominate Donald J. Trump for the office of President